Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mystics of Texas. Today we are going to be discussing something that is very relevant today and has been relevant for eons, is that how do you grow the spirituality of mankind when it has been thwarted by authorities at every angle, whether it is using men and sometimes women as pawns in war, whether it is the oppressive nature of religions throughout history, whether it is all the authoritarian figures that you see from tyrannical mayor or governor of a city-state to a whole entire nation. And we were watching a war movie last night, Fury with Brad Pitt, which is really a good movie. Really details the instances of constant stress of battle and the heroic nature of men and the bonds between them and the lengths they will go to, but also that these men, Germans in America, the Allied forces and the Germans are fighting. Well, hell, nobody wanted to fight. Our side, those guys, those boys didn't want to start fighting until they started getting a little bloody and angry that their buddies were dying. So now they're even more pissed off and want to destroy and kill the other side, and the same with the other side. And once it's over, hell, everybody's relieved. Everybody wants to go home. Everybody wants to get out of this shithole that you are not able to practice discovery in yourself. I mean, you really are discovering yourself and forced to in a very dramatic way, but you don't have time to reflect. You don't have time to do anything. You're just in survival mode nonstop. And when a lot of people are in that survival mode, they do look up to whatever God they happen to believe in for some kind of solace. But you don't get to think about it. You don't get to explore your religious book to make sure it is what you think it is. Kind of like what we've been doing with the Bible in our biblical series. You get into the depths of the Bible and it's a creepy, evil book, which is something I didn't think I would ever say. But then I read it. I read it slowly and methodically, and it's kind of hard not to think those things until you make the time to discover what it is you think and why. And if authoritarian figures were, if we went back to this kind of a city-state sort of idea, smaller incremental, smaller geographical areas, not dictated by a larger state, a larger nation, you have the option, if one is getting too bad, you can just, you can leave Marshall and go to Shreveport. You can leave Florence and go to Rome. There are different options. Those options are quickly becoming limited in the world we live in today, when thought and debate and the scientific method is scrapped. We scrap those. We censor everything. So when you start to censor, how do you discover what it is that you believe and how and why you believe it? What's your thoughts, Mr. Schmidt?
Well, first off, censorship on every level is probably a bad thing. It's kind of hard to find any argument that would be pro-censorship. Because honestly, it doesn't really matter what some small faction believes. If you believe something different and y'all can come together and work that out through the process of being humans, then that should be okay. You shouldn't have a mass authority figure telling you to censor. Back to your point when you were talking about the guys did not really want to fight, that has been proven throughout the vast course of history that humans don't want to fight in wars. There's other powers that the kings want to fight, or the prime minister, or the president wants to fight. But a really good example is they took the automatic feature off of the assault rifles for the military. They have a 3-round burst. because they found that they would freeze frame and just unload a whole clip at nothing. You know, people weren't really trying to kill something or kill somebody. And I think if somebody were to be in a situation where they had to kill somebody, or they were just thinking about killing somebody, the act is so much different than actually doing it, because people do not die the way that it's portrayed in movies. Like you were talking about the Brad Pitt movie, which is one of those weird things that I've never seen that movie. It seems like everybody else has. But all other war movies or action movies, people don't really die like that. Anybody that's ever had to kill an animal for food, or they had to kill an animal for protection that it was on their land, or, you know, a lot of people around here do hunt. You know that when you shoot somebody in the movies, you shoot somebody in the shoulder and they die. That's not how the real world works. It's a good bit of pain, agony, and there are some straight death shots, but it's very different than it's portrayed in movies. But back to the point of wanting to kill people, it's very unusual. It's those people that are in command, those rulers, and they go down to these small little groups and tribes like the Mongolian Empire. You know, they bred a whole cult-like affinity around war. And the Spartans, they built a whole cult-like affinity around war. And there are some of those minor factions that have done that, and they bred their kids to love and enjoy war, which I think we have done a lot in this country and every other country, really, by portraying action movies and video games. But really, I think that's not promoting war so much as it's promoting to die. I don't think playing video games promotes somebody to go out and kill. I think it does the exact opposite, that it makes it okay in your head to go out and die for a cause. Not necessarily to kill, but to die. Because you know what happens in a video game? Well, you die and you get a new life, and you go back and you do it again. Well, it doesn't work that way in real life. So instead of making it easier for people to kill, I think it's made it easier for people to die. And I think that is a really bad state of where we're at now.
Well, whenever you say video games, that the authorities, most people don't realize this, but the Department of Defense works hand in hand with the vast majority of game makers. And they do that for a number of reasons. You want to see who can fly a drone the best, because it's the same thing. It's a video game. You're killing people from afar while you're sitting in this little cubicle flying this thing that actually is a real object causing real harm in real time. But for that person, it's just a video game. You desensitize humanity. We've been doing it in mass, and now these video games are so real. It's okay for these people to go shoot and harm other things that look like humans on the screen, and it's okay if they actually die because they have several more lives. And you just start to brainwash people over time, just like we say, oh, well, these boys are war heroes when they come home. We celebrate them, have parades for them, all these things. Instead of that, we should have a massive amount of empathy for these soldiers who, for most of these soldiers, just wanted a good, reliable job, and they found a place that was allowed them to go in to get a job, and they wielded down, they got boiled down to the point where they found something inside of the military that they could do. They get that free training, and then they go to war. And those boys don't want to go to war. None of them, very few, except for the psychotics, psychopaths, the trained assassins. You just don't want to harm your fellow guy. It's kind of like the old thing when we were young. Well, whenever I was young, if you got into a fight in the schoolyard, this guy was a bully, or this guy was picking on one of your friends or whatever, and you just got into a tussle and hit each other a few times, rolled on the ground, hit each other a few more. Well, after that was over, we almost every time you were friends. You became friends. You no longer wanted to fight. You realized that that was a crazy thing to be doing. Even though you didn't acknowledge it was crazy, you just acknowledged the other guy. Whether you walked away knowing you were the victor, but the other guy still got some good licks on you, and you didn't want any more good licks on you.
You know, that's an interesting point that we do not allow young people to do. I mean, we both had a fair amount of martial arts training, and if you are a kid, two kids fighting, the chances is they will actually do any real damage to each other is closer to zero than any other number. You have to be fairly well trained and know what you're doing to really hurt somebody. Yeah, you'll have some bruisers or some scratches or something, but that's different than going to war where you're trying to kill somebody. So we've made it out like as though, you know, those are war heroes and stand up and pledge allegiance and go to war if your country asks you to. But small minor offenses, you're not supposed to stand up and defend yourself or even talk about it. You'll get in trouble for that. You'll get kicked out of school. You'll go to these detention things when really there's no harm in two consenting individuals wanting to fight each other for a short amount of time. It really is good and healthy, and it stops a lot of problems, because if you can't get that anger out, well, it just builds up, and then you have things like Columbine, you know, that they go out and kill a bunch of people. Now, I'm not advocating people being bullies and picking on somebody that's weaker, but if you have a disagreement, like if you and I have a disagreement, and if we threw some punches at each other, we know that it would be fine. You know, we got to throw some punches, like, oh, okay, all right, you know, we were, because I mean,
well, we've been in so many spars and training with each other that I think it would, for one, it would be practically impossible. I can't imagine any scenario where I'd want to come over and just punch you in the face. Well, for one, we don't punch; it would be a strike. But yeah. But if you don't have those type of experiences where authoritarian figures squash the human spirit and expression, but through kids on up, and then say, you know, if you see a bully and you don't go take care of him and make him stop picking on somebody else, you know, you're the one who gets in trouble. But then at the same time, a few years later, we say, well, it's okay. You know, you're defending freedom. It's okay to go out and kill people now. It's okay to go thwart that because they're the bad guy. They're the big bad guy. And we've been shown throughout history that the governments do nothing except lie, from everything from World War I and II to getting us into Vietnam, from the Gulf of Tonkin BS, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, it's all BS. It's all BS. And people know that. Those men know after they spend some time on the battlefield that this is bullshit. They're being used as pawns, and then it's really hard to start discovering who and what you are and what you believe in when you've been propagandized so much your entire life. You start to get confused, and it's a difficult thing for most people to analyze why they feel these things, because, you know, on one hand it's bad, on one hand it's great because they're boogeymen and we need to get rid of them. It's complete nonsense. And then you say, oh well, we have the Bible that is, you know, sacrosanct in the American psyche for the most part, and you go, well, have you ever read it? It's a problem.
You know, I think one of the biggest problems here is what we even boil down and talk about what these authoritarian figures are, because it starts very early in a kid's life in most households. I know through some family members that I have that they have younger children, and they always give a reason that because I said so, or because your dad said so, or because your mom said so. That is not a good reason to do something. Right there at home, we are teaching our kids to follow an authoritarian figure blindly for no reason. Like, they stand up when they get into, now it's pre-K, and now our wonderful government that we have in place now wants to add 2 additional years of indoctrination is what it is. I mean, the word kindergarten is a German word. It came straight out of Hitler's playbook to stand up and pledge of allegiance. There's no difference between a kid standing up and doing this and a kid standing up and doing this. It came out of the same playbook to follow these authoritarian figures. Whether you think that's a positive or a negative, if you look at the real reasons behind why we have kids do this, it all boils down to a very bad thing. Whether you want to have pride in your country or not, you should want your kids to make an informed decision about these things. Because if you start them at an early age of making informed decisions, then they will go through that process of life of making informed decisions. I personally am called out all the time because I always explain things to my child, and I know that he doesn't get it now, and I understand that. But my point is if you don't start having those deep conversations and trying to pin down what you believe and talking to your kid about what they believe and how that relates and why they should do something, why they shouldn't do something, I get it. Parents, they get, they got all this daily life going on. They don't want to spend the time and do that. But if you don't do it, then you're leaving it for somebody else to do, the public school system, to indoctrinate the kids the way that they want. Then you get into things like they're teaching critical race theory and all these things that you don't believe in. Well, because at home, you are not doing the duty. You're advocating that to somebody else. You're letting someone else do that. And if you don't start having these discussions of what is right and what's wrong and why you believe this and why they believe that, or talking to them about what they believe from the age of 2 and 3, you say, oh, well, they're too young to learn that. Well, but when is the right age? Because if you don't start doing it, then you're never going to start doing it. Well, when's too early and when's too late? Well, when that kid starts coming up with their own decisions, it's too late. They've already had that influence from the other authoritarian figures and not from you. And I'm advocating that your parenting should not be from a place of authoritarian figure. It should be from a mentoring point of view.
It should be reason and not force.
Definitely reason and not force. I like to think, and I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of where we're at with the public schooling system and the authoritarian figures from a young age is it is all mandated by force.
Oh, well, that goes down to the authoritarian figures of government itself. It's compulsory education. It is such an evil proposition that it's really difficult because you cloud these kids' minds with things makes it very difficult for them later in life to expand, because they've been so propagandized to reach inside their souls, to start exploring their spirituality, to deeper find connections with the people around them, and find and discover themselves. Spend time. These schools don't teach meditation. These don't teach verbal communication and how to communicate clearly with each other, how to respect each other in a conversation or a debate. That is education in the human spiritual terms. When in the United States we teach you how to memorize. We cover up a lot of the evils of our own nation, from all the experiments that we've done to unsuspecting people, all the orphanages that we've had kids taken out and had abuses put on them in the guise of science and liberation from disease, which has all been nonsensical and evil. To a large degree, our government promotes a lot of evil, and yet we still trust them. And we trust them because we see on the news, we beat the bad guy. This other entity over here who has never done anything to anybody here has no, they just don't matter. They don't matter. None of them matter. If you have one of the good things about this country is that we have, which is quickly eroding, is that we have the Bill of Rights. And even though they are largely going more and more unrespected, and people don't really even know what they are, they do give you the right of religious freedom. And they do have the Second Amendment, which is, without that, governments have the monopoly on crime and force. It's okay if, just like these parents around the country who go and talk to their school boards about these different things that are happening in the schools that they disagree with. And then what happens? The school boards have SWAT teams go invade these people's homes and have them arrested because they were disorderly, when in fact they were just having a conversation. They were illustrating points and why they disagree, these are open forums. These are what makes or what has made America better than some other places in the past. Was we had the ability to express ourselves without fear of being censored, being kidnapped and put into a cage. Because who has the right to kidnap in this country? It's the government. Who has the right to lock humans up in a cage? It's the government. We don't. Who has the right to counterfeit money? The government. It continues on in such a fashion that it's easy to understand how the minds of people get confused and they end up losing themselves, and they get sold on the idea of materialism and commercialism and lose sight of their own soul and their own spirit, and how to find it and how to embrace it and how to expand upon the natural love that's in men's hearts. I think that I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and talking about some people you just can't reach. Some people are just not good people. And his point was, well, I believe all people have the ability to be good. And I was like, yeah, I think so too. I said, I'll kind of view it like this. Well, everybody has a beautiful, shiny soul, but most people have their soul covered up with dirty, nasty crap. And you can't even get to it because you need a track hoe or a bunch of shovels to dig all the muck out in order to polish up that nice thing. And most people aren't willing to dig through all the junk to get to their core, to find out who they are and how their presence on this earth can be better for themselves and for others. And it's difficult to do that with authoritarian figures at every corner selling us on, I'm not a good person if I'm not keeping up with the Joneses, or my wife's not going to love me if I don't do this or that. We have allowed Madison Avenue, the PR firms and the advertising agencies to really sell us on a crock.
I'm glad you brought up the advertising agencies, because I would like to make I think it's an interesting point that I've thought about for a long time. So one of the problems with the public school system or private school system is we put kids into an age range. They're only allowed to speak and talk to people within their own age range from the time that they are in pre-kindergarten until they get into middle school, where they can kind of start mixing with 6th grade, can mix with 7th and 8th grade. And then you get into high school and you only have 4, age ranges where you mix in together. Well, what does Madison Avenue do, and all the advertising firms? They use that same model that has been indoctrinated in kids, and they group people in age range, how to market to this age range and how to market to that age range, and what works best. I think that's a huge flaw in our system, and we have lost our sense of self because there is no self-exploration when you're 15 and you're hanging around a bunch of 15-year-olds. If you go back to ancient Greece or Rome or Egypt even, it was very common for young people to have a mentor of someone that was of much older age than them. And they also had groups where the people took care of people, where there was a community, where there would be older kids taking care and babysitting younger kids, and that the younger kids helped the older kids. And then now we have, within our society today, we have a huge problem with the elderly, where we have taken them and put them in their own community, in retirement homes and nursing homes. Just how we have through all of the school age kids. We want to keep people in their age range and in their groups and keep them from intermingling. What would work best? If you look at ancient civilizations, what did they do with the elderly? They were valued members of the community that taught and lectured and helped and gave stories to the younger kids. So we talk about, in our society, we need to have state-funded education because we need to get parents out there working, and then we got to take care of the elderly. So we're spending money on more education, indoctrination for the kids, and then we push our elderly aside. Well, what should we do? We should take those valued members of our community, and the elderly should have a co-daycare dependency on the young kids, where the young kids learn and grow and do things with the elderly. I mean, if you go to nursing homes, what is the most prized moment in a nursing home is when somebody has their grandkids or great grandkids there and they're playing a board game with them. They're playing checkers. I remember I was very young, but playing checkers with my grandfather. And that's really the only memory I have of him, because he died when I was very young because my parents were older. But I know he liked that because the conversations that I've had with you, that you had a much better understanding of who he was as a person. Y'all loved playing games. And why would not everybody love that? Of course the elderly like to get a sense of youth about them, because some things that we don't see, things that are hidden from us, is that children have very special pheromones that they put out, and that they interact with people. Like if you're a father and you hold a small kid, it drops your testosterone level. Why is that important? Because it keeps the man around to raise the kid until it's old enough to fend for itself. That's just one aspect of how children interact with things that we don't see. They have a sense of life and being where they interact with those elder hormones, and it gives them a better sense of life. It's been shown to cut less pain and less dependency on foreign medications by just having this sense of youth around, that those kids are a sense of therapy for the elderly. Why don't we promote something like that more in our country? Why do we section off everybody into their own little groups? And then you were talking about people that don't want to fight.
Well, let me stop you before you go on that, because what you're saying is, why would we have authoritarian figures? Everything that you've been describing is a construct of public policy that we have continuously promoted, getting rid of the elderly, putting them in some home so the two parents can work to support their other kid, and as they get older, their kid's going to throw them in a nursing home because they don't have a choice, because they have to work. What we've done is created this construct to the authoritarian figures, big corporations lobbying for these laws, lobbying for higher taxes, lobbying for all of these things that have created this society of distance and not spirit, created these natural connections that you're talking about. Those are become more and more limited. Even though many people are being forced to stay home, the connections are still not there because there's only one or two, three people in the house maybe, which is all by design. And this is what governments have been doing for really in full force since after World War II. You can just go back and look and be a forensic historian and easily see how every decade from 1945, from Operation Paperclip, whenever we brought the majority of the evil scientists and leaders of Germany into our government in the United States to start to enact the same type brainwashing that they had been doing in Germany. I mean, just look who the first head of NASA was. It came directly from the head of the German, the Braun guy. It's unbelievable how these things continuously progress, and nobody seems to put the dots together. Whenever you have the governments out of the way, when you have all these rules out of the way, you are able to communicate without permission. We are able to talk. We're able to love. We're able to express things in such a way where you are forced in a much greater sense to find common ground with people than you otherwise would. And I think that's very valuable. And to switch gears to authoritarians, which I think you were on the path to do, I think we have to look at the great religions of the world.
Yeah, well, I was switching from that authoritarian thing that they have linked us in that, and then back to the willingness to fight of how do we get kids amped up for these things. We put them out on a football field on Friday night and say, oh, go fight, kill. That's one of the expressions. You go out and you want to have a violent game where you hit each other. And who pays for it? Well, you're forced to pay for it. If you don't agree with those things and you don't want to pay for it, then you are forced with men with guns sent by the school system. The men with guns will come and get you and take everything you have if you don't feel like paying for those violent gestures. If you don't feel like sectioning off parts of the community into the age range, and you don't feel that is spiritually good for you, you are either forced to do it or they take everything that you have from you.
It's a total violation of spirituality in this country. It's no different than the poisons that they put in the food to control hormones, or the fluoride in the water that has been proven with many studies, including a very well-known Harvard study where they know that having all this fluoride in the water does nothing to promote the teeth, no matter how brainwashed the dentist may be, because they've taken fluoride out of the water in most civilized nations around the world, and they have less teeth decay and teeth problems than we do in the United States. And they know that for a fact that it calcifies the pineal gland, which is considered the third eye, your spiritual opening, your ability to feel the good or bad vibes in another person, to be able to have those intuitions that are given to us by all the vibrations of the universe, to be able to feel and be in tune with nature. Those are purposefully taken away from us unless you are aware and you are constantly and cognitively pursuing ways toward the spirituality lifestyle where you can overcome all of this propaganda and all this brainwashing, and overcome within yourself ways to be a better person. And religions themselves have been doing this since the beginning dawn of time, to be able to control their masses with hierarchies of priests. And of course there have been a lot better ones than others, but it's still been problematic because we've allowed that to happen, especially over the past 2,000 years. It's become evident that it's even a bigger issue. Like you can look at if you're Islam, we are the infidel. If you read their book, well, we are to die. If you look at the Old Testament, well, God is only for Israel. He's not for the United States or any other country. He's not for any other people. All you have to do is read it. It clearly says, thousands of times it seems that I've read it, that over and over and over again, I am only the God of Israel. So now the Jews, have their superiority complex. Now you have Islam wanting all the infidels to die. Then you have Christianity, who thinks killing and wars with the W, weapons of mass destruction, and destroying Cambodia and Vietnam and just as Truman says, he slept good that night whenever he destroyed all the women and children in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Those are psychopaths. And that type behavior continues on into this very moment, even more so in this moment, especially with the current condition that we're in, and everybody's just taking it. Like we have taken it so many times. And, you have Catholicism versus Baptist, and, all these different sects within Christianity even. All of these things people attempt to sell you, when the truth, your spirit and your soul, is yours. Your body is the temple, as we discussed so many times. We individually are the temple. We find our own spirituality,
but only if you break away from the masses and the mainstream of thought, which is a very difficult thing. We can say that our body is a temple all day long, but for the vast majority of people, I like to think of that most people are like subdivisions. Every house is exactly the same. They flip the floor plan on this house or that house. But if you look over the vast course of humanity, we say we're all temples, but what does that really mean? I mean, through the powers that be and authoritarian figures, it has limited the creative expression of our temples. It's limited it through, oh, if I make this really big and pretty, I'm going to have to pay taxes on it, so I can't make it like that. I've got to make it look ugly so I don't have to pay taxes. Much like in our creative souls and ourselves, is we're so blah, cookie cutter. Everybody's the same. Nobody really has a unique temple. We might think we do. Well, we hung our picture over here when our neighbor hung it over there. We don't have that creative flow that we think we have, because we're so indoctrinated all the way through our learning that most temples look like the subdivision. That's why it's great to have a soul like Alan Watts, or I really think J.P. Sears is wonderful. And what's the guy that we watched the last?
I love Sadhguru, and there's so many. Oh man, I mean, when you just start thinking about the great people that are enlightening, you have them in so many different fields. From Nathan Harriman in physics, you have. I'm drawing a blank now, but Robert. He has the theory that everything is basically an illusion, and like everything is an icon, like on a computer. I can't recall his name right now, but he's great. Robert Sheldrake, he's another fantastic spiritualist.
But those are the impressive buildings of the world. Those are the Sistine Chapels. Those are the big buildings. They're the Florence. Those are those people. Not everybody's temple looks like that. So what we have to do first is recognize that we live in a subdivision, and that you don't have this unique temple that you think you have, and to really start working on that, because it's a slow process. First, you have to realize there's a problem and that you're brainwashed, because if you don't think you're brainwashed, they've done a really good job on you. Trust me, I'm brainwashed, and I know I'm brainwashed, and that just makes it a little bit harder for them. But if you don't think you're brainwashed, boy, let me tell you, you got some work to do.
Yeah, and life is a work, and life is a struggle. Life is a realization that there are a lot of personal issues that we have to overcome, and we can't overcome those when we're blasted with government propaganda and government agendas from every angle, from every government. And if everyone just realized we didn't need them, we would be able to focus a lot more on our individual growth and our love and our experimentation with different things that can work better for different people. Not everything is the same. Not everything has to be the exact same subdivision everywhere. It does not. Well, Mr. Schmidt, do you have anything else to add? I think that was a fun conversation, and thank y'all for staying to the end.
Yeah, I think that was a very fun conversation. All I have left is, if you like what we have out there, give us a thumbs up. We are on all the alternatives: BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, and I think you said you had a couple more of them that we'll list in the description. And if that's it, have a good day.